Hello, I am Sherry Braithwaite.
And I am David Patterson.
And yes, and we are in the Family Theory and Dynamics class. And since we're the very first presentation, we wanted to go over just a little bit. David will go over a little bit about what the components of theory are.
Because we are first, I thought it'd be a good idea if we just talked about theory for a minute before we got into our theory. So, in the introduction of the book, it talks about a theory is a useful tool to understand and describe the world around us, right? And more specifically, the theory is a general framework for ideas and things that we have. It's made up of assumptions, which are our beliefs or common beliefs, the concepts, obviously building blocks and concepts within the theory, and then the propositions after that, and how the concepts are related to one another, scientific and systematic. And then critiques after that. So you ready to jump into our specific theory?
Yeah, so we're going to describe the family development theory. I have a bunch of things to talk about with the critiquing because as I was reading this, my critiquing brain was all on high gear.
I know it.
So
No, and I got all excited about some stuff too, so let's go.
yeah, so I will tell you the phases and then we'll talk about the critiquing. There's another slide here that talks about how that fits into the critiquing. So here are the assumptions of this theory. First, this is ideal, or this is how it was Evelyn Duval and Reuben Hill, who said if the family does not resolve their previous stages of challenges before moving into a new stage, the stress in this transition will cause significant challenges for the family. And that could be why there's more stress, we don't know. But here they go. You start off, establishment phase is courtship and marriage. And then families with infants is the next stage, the childbearing families. And then families with preschool children. And then we go into the families with school-age children. And then the next phase in this development family is the families with adolescents. And then families with young adults. And then the middle age years, that's after you've sent all the kids off to college, because in this ideal or this philosophy of theory is that these couples are married at a young enough age that their middle age is probably 40-ish, and they've sent off their children who were 20-ish, so they're 18 to 20 years old.
Yeah.
And then the middle years, and then the aging family years.
Right.
So let's talk about the critiques, because that's the part that we have a lot to talk about.
Well, let me set the table a little bit before we start with the critiques, because this particular theory was written by a woman who was most likely educated in the 1930s, because by the time it came out, she was working on it in 48 and it came out in 57. So this has some mileage on it already, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so the critiques we have of this theory, it's interesting that it was a standard, and we were in almost an agrarian society when she first started developing this. So, what are some of your critiques? Where do you want?
I love that you pointed that out, because we do have to consider the source, right? With all of our theories, we have to consider the source. And so from the very beginning, my critique was it starts off with a family who gets married at I assume a fairly young age, maybe right out of college. And that does happen, but in my world and in my life, that did not happen. The first time I got married, or when I got married, I was 33. So I'm already outside of this assumption. And then I would have loved to have children. I did not have children right away. So the childbearing years was also not my story. And so that's where I was critiquing, because a lot of families that I know don't fit this. I think it does apply. In fact, you know what? You may even have it up. We were talking about some of the critiquing that it applies to, did it say, well, two parents, man and woman parents, and then
and heterosexual, and
for sure, but then also anyway that Anyway, it just it just doesn't apply to all families. So when we go
Well,
in,
that's it. And I think it's important to remember that theories aren't laws.
yeah,
And so not yet anyway. I mean, a theory might develop into a law later on after all of this, but um, these are the theory is just what did I say earlier? It's an ideal. In this case, I talked about it as an ideal,
yeah,
and this particular theory kind of parallels the family proclamation in some ways, right?
yeah.
It's there.
Hmm.
And there are those that are saying that the proclamation might be a theory, and and they're working that out, right?
Wow.
But I think you can't, well, in my opinion, you can't throw the ideal away. So if this
Right.
theory, if we can all agree that this particular theory is an ideal,
Yeah.
because it's been drastically taken apart in the family development world
Yeah.
uh, by many people.
It's just an assumption, and then but then it's also open for critiquing. That is part of the theory, is the critique. So there's nothing wrong with critiquing these theories,
No,
but it's good to. I mean, that's all part of it. I had a 4-minute video of someone who is critiquing all the thoughts that I had about this theory.
Among women between 35 and 44 in 2010, around 20% had never been married. In comparison, for the previous generation at that age, only 10% of women had never been married. Even with declining marriage rates, most Americans will marry at least once. For many, this stage of settling into a new family comes with changes in expectations of what married life will look like. How a couple handles the transition from courtship into marriage is an important predictor of family stability. Couples who married 40 years ago, we know what percent of those marriages have ended in divorce, and that's a decent proxy for how many will ever end in divorce. For Americans who married in the 1970s and 1980s, about 40 to 45% of those marriages have ended in divorce. So changing marriage patterns has also meant changing patterns in the family life cycle, like when people have kids. While childbearing is typically thought of as the stage of the family life cycle that follows marriage, the percent of children born outside of marriage has been increasing, with about 40% of all births to unmarried mothers. There are also increasing social class divides in who has kids before or after marriage. While only 9% of births to college-educated moms take place outside marriage, 58% of births outside marriage are to women with only a high school diploma. But regardless of whether having kids comes before or after marriage, this stage in the family life cycle is an important one. In pre-industrial America, large families were much more common, partially because of a lack of effective birth control, partially because having more children meant more hands to help with the work on a farm, and partially because high rates of child mortality meant that many kids didn't live to adulthood. A 2010 survey found that the majority of millennials say that being a good parent is one of the most important things in life, ranking it higher than having a successful marriage. Thanks, Thought Bubble. The next stage of family life is the launch stage, in which kids grow up and leave their parents' house, usually in their early 20s. Though mom and dad might suffer from some empty nest syndrome when the kids first leave, many remain involved in their kids' lives, often providing childcare for their grandchildren once their kids start having families of their own. This post-children stage of family life is the final part of the family life cycle. Additionally, as lifespans increase, many adult children find themselves in caregiver roles for their aging parents. The sandwich generation refers to people who care for their aging parents at the same time that they provide care for children living in their household. This is particularly common for women, who are more likely to take on caregiving roles in a family. As I said at the beginning, these stages of the family life cycle are just one path that a family can follow. There are all types of families, and not all of them will be nuclear families with a mom, a dad, and a bunch of biological offspring. For one thing, not all married couples have or want children. Plus, not all families with kids have two parents. Single-parent families make up about 1/3 of all families with children. Single-parent families are most often headed by a single mother rather than a single father. 58% of unmarried births were to cohabiting couples, or couples who live together without being married. Unmarried or divorced parents may also marry someone new, creating a blended family with one parent in a household who is unrelated to some or all of the children. So there's a lot of diversity in what a family can look like, but they often tend to follow similar paths. But no matter what a family looks like, the family life cycle helps us understand how families evolve over time.
If anyone has any questions or any other comments about it, certainly let us know.
Thank you very much. See ya.
Thank you.